I remember standing in the shower one morning in college, thinking about how far behind I had fallen, and feeling overwhelmed by how much work it would take to catch up. If someone had shown me then where I would end up years later, I would not have believed them. That's the thing about being in the middle of a story. You have no idea how it ends. I like reading biographies for exactly this reason. The person who emerges as a hero on page 500 is often going through a crisis on page 200. When you're on page 200, you have no idea how the story is going to end. Lloyd Blankfein writes in Streetwise, "The disappointments of the moment often yield to greatness down the line, and people's life stories prove it." I find that reassuring. I've had periods of my life like that shower morning, periods where if someone had shown me where I would eventually end up, I probably wouldn't have believed them. I was fully aware that I wasn't doing well in college. My dad had told me early on to focus on my studies. Scholarships had a much higher return than working part-time while trying to study. I didn't listen. I started college with substantial scholarships, but I didn't follow that up with the seriousness that should have accompanied. Eventually, the consequences caught up with me. I lost most of my financial aid, was working part-time, struggling to keep up with coursework, and some mornings I couldn't even get myself out of bed in time for class. The frustrating part was that I knew I was failing. I just didn't yet know how to turn it around. I eventually took a quarter off. My parents took me along on some hiking trips, and getting physically stronger helped me recover enough to return to school. When I went back, my grades didn't suddenly become excellent. The coursework was still difficult, but I kept going. I stuck with my major. Eventually, I graduated. Looking back, there wasn't some dramatic moment where everything suddenly clicked. I did not become a completely different person overnight. I just didn't quit. That personal story is only half of this, though. Here's the part that changed how I look at everyone else's. Sam Walton writes in Made in America. Like most other overnight successes, it was about 20 years in the making. People love the phrase overnight success because it gives us a simple explanation for something complicated. Someone suddenly becomes successful. A company suddenly takes off. Someone suddenly becomes exceptionally talented. The years of preparation, mistakes, uncertainty, and work are usually invisible. Angela Duckworth calls one version of this the naturalness bias. Our tendency to assume that people who have achieved something did so because they were naturally talented rather than because they worked for it. There's another distortion now, too. We can see the highlights of almost anyone's life. There's always someone somewhere who appears to be ahead of us. Younger, more successful, more talented, more accomplished, someone who seems to have figured everything out. But we're comparing our own unfinished story with somebody else's highlights. We know all the mistakes we've made, the uncertainty, the things we're still struggling with, how far away we are from where we want to be. We don't see any of that as someone else's carefully presented success. Perhaps the most important part is that they don't know how their story is going to end either. The person you admire at page 500 didn't know what was going to happen when they were on page 200. They were just living through it, trying things, making mistakes, taking the next step, sometimes failing, sometimes getting lucky, continuing. I've started thinking about my own life that way. I'm not particularly interested in calling myself an overnight success. I'm still very much a work in progress. But the person I was in college, standing in this shower every morning, knowing he had fallen badly behind, and having no idea how to fix it, couldn't have imagined that years later I would find significant meaning in the career I had built. He could not have known that. That's the point. You don't know what page you're on. What feels like a dead end might just be a difficult chapter, What feels like wasted time might become something you learn from later. And what looks like a permanent failure might simply be something you have not recovered from yet. So when I look at other people's success, I'm trying to remember that I'm probably seeing their page 500. When I look at my own life, I'm trying to remember that I haven't reached the last page yet.